Hi, this is Chuck Martin up at the AI Summit London. I'm very happy to say I've got with me Simon Mortimore, Assistant Director of Business Info, the South Central Ambulance Service, NHS Fund Trust. Welcome.
Well, hi,
That's
Chuck.
a long title.
That's a long title, yeah. We like big titles in the NHS.
So tell me about the ambulance service and where on earth AI fits in this.
So in the UK, the ambulance service is part of the National Health Service. So there's 10 ambulance services cover the whole of England. We cover about 7 million people to the area of the west of London. So I lead the BI team at South Central Ambulance, and our job is to help people make decisions to deliver our services effectively and efficiently. So our AI concept is basically, I'm a horrible manager, so it's about efficiency and quality of analytics. I can do more faster with AI than I can using traditional methods. It's just the scope of what we can do and the speed at which we can do it. It's opening up things we could never have done 2 or 3 years ago in terms of analytical capability.
So is it just predictive modeling, or is it more than that?
It's more than that. We do a lot of sort of clinical analysis. A lot of it is around basic business operational processes like resource management, HR management. We've done work around attrition in our call centers and in our staff, sickness, what's driving factors of sickness, task resourcing. When we get an increased response time, we've analysed that, say what's causing that response time increase, to give our managers levers to then go and change it so we're responding faster and being more efficient in our services. We're also looking at things like sentiment analysis from staff surveys. So it's not just about the predictive analysis, it's basically management information and how you use information as a manager to run whatever you do, whether you're in the public or private sector.
So isn't NHS one of the largest employers in the world?
I think the third largest employer in the world. I think it's after the Chinese Red Army and Indian Railways, I believe, is the stat that's always kind of rolled out.
So how do you scale AI in something that big?
It's interesting because although it employs a lot of people, the units are still independent. It's not, although it's technically one big amorphous, and there's a separate one for Wales, England and Scotland, so it's not the UK, Northern Ireland. What tends to happen is that we share a lot of information. I know who my colleagues are doing my jobs in the hospitals and in community care and in mental health. So we have a lot of sharing of information, a lot of sharing of best practice. AI and ML is still very new in healthcare, I think, in all areas. We know it's done very well in imaging in acute hospitals, but it's like everywhere, it's still trying to find its feet in a lot of day-to-day businesses. We do have a challenge, and it's recognised at national level. There's a lot of policies now around data saves lives, working with private sector organisations to innovate, which we do a lot of. We work with a lot of private sector companies with us to innovate, like GE, and some of our partners, to kind of roll this stuff out for patient care. So it's difficult, but it's beginning to take traction with sharing ideas now. For example, yesterday we had some colleagues from community care into the office showing them what we're doing, and they're going to go back and pick that up. So a lot of it's ad hoc, but it is beginning to take some traction now.
So how do you deal with things like security, something that big, or in privacy, which is a big deal in healthcare?
Well, it's very interesting actually, because we generally apply the general privacy and protection laws. As you know, Chuck, I'm a great believer that AI has got to embed itself within the normality of life. It can't sit existentially. So basically a lot of the principles we do are what we were doing anyway around data and information and security. For example, I was reading the EU document the other week about stakeholder engagement. Well, we do that anyway as part of data protection impact assessment, so you're always doing the stakeholder. The security, pseudonymization, anonymization, risk management, when you're assessing a project for risk, you do that with an AI and ML project. For example, the one we did around staff sickness, where we knew we had a problem with crews after 6 months, we pseudonymized all the data and gave it to the universities. They couldn't identify anything. When they gave it back to us, we were able to unpseudonymize it and identify those 5 factors which were driving that sickness. So I don't think it's as big as challenge as people make out, to be quite honest, around the security and governance. Just do what you're doing now, and actually, I'm a great believer in there's loads of stuff out there we can use. We don't have to reinvent the wheel to move this forward.
So are you using AI for ambulance scheduling, for future scheduling?
We're not at the moment. The reason we've done some analysis around demand, both in terms of the shape of demand, but also clinical mix, because we know we can put 5 skill sets out on a vehicle. So when do we get things? And I've done that because I'm not prepared to do it because I think it's too risky at the moment. I think actual automatic rostering. So we're in a phase of understanding this, building our knowledge, low risk processes, like expenses and analysis, and in 2 years our aim will be to move it into those more high risk. So we will say what's our demand, but we won't auto-rotate and auto-allocate staff at the moment. We'll then be a human in the loop which will go, yeah, okay, I understand that, okay, yeah, I think that's okay. They're using it as a guide rather than an automatic process.
So in the future, you have 2 ambulance services, if I understand this correctly. One is emergency service, and one is scheduled service?
Yeah, that's a patient transport, which people who need transport to their community, their place of care, but I don't need an ambulance. It's more a lot of it's oncology services, dialysis and stuff like that, which is a big service. I mean, we look after 2.8 million patients a year. We have 2.8 million patient contacts a year, and a lot of that's a scheduled service. But we have started to look on using AI to model what we call dispatch on demand. So try to schedule the whole thing across 7 million people. Can we kind of use an ambulance dispatch? And actually we looked at a demand, and we used University of Southampton did some work last year, which we're just looking at, like, should we roll that out? It's because actually what happens during the day, all your plans go to pot. I think it was Mike Tyson said, like a boxing, the strategy is great until they get punched in the face. And the reality is hospitals can be delayed on discharges. We've got 23 hospitals we talk to. So we're kind of saying, actually, can we maintain that level of service through actually saying, we know we're going to get a big lump of demand out of Southampton Hospital on the 3 o'clock in the afternoon, let's put some vehicles down there. We did some very interesting sort of bus, we call it busing, so basically. So we'll use some AI modelling around that. Again, looking at, do we roll that out the next 12 months? Do we look at that dispatch on demand rather than the plan? Personally, I think it works, and so because that's a natural rhythm to hospitals.
So in manufacturing, which is obviously totally different than this, the companies are now using predictive technology to determine when a machine is going to break in advance.
Yeah.
Would you be able to use AI potentially in the future to identify when the transport is going to need, before they know they need to be transported?
We actually have been working with GE and one of their partners for about a 3-year project. Then we had the nastiness, which we won't talk about, which sort of delayed things. But we've actually just about to move that into a production mode. We've actually, the telemetry from our ambulances, we get about 250 data points every 5 minutes, and we've working with GE and their companies to design this predictive modelling based on the aircraft engines, which they monitor in real time. We also work with Ordnance Survey there, who did some geospatial analysis. We've got the journeys overlaid, what sort of road they've been driving around. Ordnance Survey, our national mapping agency. And literally last week they came out with that first conceptual model, which we're now going to try and move into production. It looked at they clustered faults like transmission faults, electrical faults, engine faults, and got some really, some of it was obvious. Like, if your vehicle's been in a high urban area, the brakes going on off, do you know what? The brake pads wear out. Now we kind of went, but we had somebody from Fleet said, that's really, really important to us, because we lose a lot of vehicles because the brake pads wear out before they're scheduled for replacement. So if you can give me a model that says there's a high probability this brake pad's going to wear out, can you check it? That will save us hundreds of thousands of pounds. So again, that was a really interesting project, but also the importance of what we do is getting your SMEs in, bringing the real world in to guide your projects and deliver value. So I'm kind of really excited about that project, because it's a project we're doing on a commercial basis as a private sector company, bringing knowledge from another industry. I had to work in the LNG industry, so I said, let's poke that with a stick and see if we can do something. And actually, I think it's going to deliver a real benefit over the next 3 years. And when I saw the presentation last week, I went, okay, this is pretty cool now. This is really, really cool, particularly with the geospatial data. Again, we're management, so you can't use single data sets. You've got to contextualize the manufacturing process is great because you're looking at a manufacturing line. There's very little external influences. What we do is massive external. You can't just look at an ambulance response. There's so much more contextual stuff you've got to sort of bring into your models if you can.
So do you look at extended logistics as well, like for example, tying your ambulances into traffic light systems so that it can control the traffic light as it's going through, so they all go the right
we
way?
don't have to, because we can just drive through it. All we do, the irony is that what we do actually, the funny thing is, we're on blue lights, you do just drive through it.
Right.
But if we do actually get a ticket from the police that we have to then process and check up the fact that the vehicle was on blue lights, just in case they were being a bit naughty and speedy, but no, that's how it works. So I think that's a very interesting, I'm not saying we would do, that would be the police and highway would do something. I don't know if that actually would impact much. I think if you talk to people, they say actually what blue lights are about, it's not necessarily going fast, it's about going smoothly and consistently. But again, I'm quite fascinated with the telemetry data we've now got. That's always been a theory, but because we've got a little data field that says blue light on, blue light off, so I said actually we could start looking at that, saying is that actually enough, what's the factors? It's one of those things. We might get one of the students from Southampton University who we work quite closely with to kind of do that as a project. So you can actually look at it and see what the impact of blue lights is.
Yeah, I think that since NHS is so big, it could cause a market change like that.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because, I guess particularly with ambulances, there's only 10 of us. The rest of the NHS is absolutely huge. There's thousands of entities within it, both public and private, a lot of private. But ambulance services are quite a neat little function. There is only 10 of us, and I know the other 9 people that sort of do my job, so we can spread influence. And there is a national drive to standardise across the ambulance services. For instance, all our ambulances are bought centrally now, just standard spec. And that there is an opportunity there. I think you were asking the challenge of spreading knowledge. One of the, worked in lots of healthcare settings is, God, there's so many of it. It's just like any large organisation. The bigger it gets, the more difficult it becomes, the more geographically, But I think the ambulance service has got a reputation for kind of doing weird things and people picking them up. We talk a lot with our partners, and they're starting to pick stuff up that we do now and trying to roll it out locally. So, but again, it's very much driven by culture and attitude. Do you want to adopt this stuff? And it comes from the top. If people want to adopt it, they will do. And there's the whole cost issue we have about. But we're starting off very low cost. I think a lot of people try to jump to the end game. And start off simple. You can do a lot of this analysis and getting yourself going. A lot of our stuff we did at the University of Hampton, got their students in. We said, right, you go and solve this problem for us, but you've got to use machine learning. And we're now using those case studies. We're just about to go into our proof of concepts with 2 suppliers who are at a platform. And we said, there's the case studies, show us you can deliver that. And they said, oh, can you tell us what the results were? We went, no, because we want to see if your system comes up with the same results. Well, it's a bit unfair. So, yeah, I'm like that, I'm afraid. But the advice I'd give is, around anybody adopting this, not just in healthcare, is don't be overawed, do the basics, and remember, make sure you've got a well-defined business problem which suits that. Have I got the data? Is it reliable? All that stuff. There's loads of stuff. Even you've got a couple of bright analysts could start you on the journey of understanding this stuff, and don't get hooked up into technology. The one thing we've learned is that's sort of commoditized now. It's the whole ethics and business value and how you deliver it is where you've got to start focusing now. But with digital, hasn't ever been us. I always like saying when people say digital, what do you mean by digital? That's a good question. So my advice would be, don't try and jump large. We had suppliers that said, we're going to put AI into your dispatch systems. They said, no, you're not. You think I'm going to sign that up as a risk? Absolutely no. In 2-3 years, when we understand it, we've got our own what's operating, and what we're learning now through simple ad hoc and low risk process automation, then we'll move to that stage. But I'm the person who would end up in the court if it goes wrong, so I'm a bit resistant to kind of leaping that barrier. But I don't think the barriers to entry into AI and ML, even for SMEs, are as big as maybe people think. I think there's a lot of good stuff now out there with the auto ML and all that stuff coming along. And I think the good ethical debate we're having is actually getting people interested in starting that communication. Actually, what is AI? What is ML? What is it? What isn't? Is Robocop going to come stream? Oh no, I'm more worried about one of my colleagues in Canary Wharf doing something in a global financial system. The equivalent of throwing a match into a tinder dry forest. That's what worries me more. But I think there's lots of opportunities, and people don't be afraid. There's lots of really good common sense stuff out there now that you can start to get your head around it, start to understand it, and start to, okay, we can do this, we can deploy it. It's not as big a challenge as you think.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about visionaries, because you're one of the active roundtable members. What's your experience with visionaries?
I think I really like it because it's a global organisation, it's a global entity, and I think the skills mix and experience mix you get on that is really, really good. I think you've got, and I will admit, I've got a picture in my head. I'm not an expert. If you asked me to go and do a logistic regression expert, I wouldn't have a clue how to do it. My job is to kind of say, yeah, we're going to go in that direction for these reasons. But I think you've got loads of people. I think debate is really good as well because it's not confrontational. It's supportive, and there's lots of experience. And I think AI and ML now is in that scratchy head phase. And actually, I think what something like that brings is that safe psychological environment to discuss these issues without us going into the camps and throwing rocks at each other. Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. It's got a good mix of people like me who are more business value orientated with the technical people as well. I think it's very interesting as well about how the challenges in different, the North America, Europe, the Far East, APAC, is very interesting about how a lot of those challenges are the same. Sometimes we get too obsessed with geographies, I think. And actually it's more about what's human nature and, there's legal frameworks we understand. The EU, Britain is very different from North America, APAC is in that sort of halfway place. So I think it's a fantastic body for bringing like-minded people who are enthusiastic about it to talk and work and learn and experience in a positive way. So I think I enjoy it because it's really intellectually stimulating as well, I find.
So a year from now, we're sitting here having this conversation, and AI, what would we be talking about?
It's a very interesting question. I think we'll still be talking about the ethics and regulation and how we move this forward. I think some of the more panicky stuff that's going on at the moment will have dissipated. But alternatively, people will be more aware of it because it's stimulating people wanting to know. I think people will now be looking at, okay, show me the real world value of this. Put dollars on this for me. Let's understand it. Let's move it forward. I think we'll move into a more, okay, let's understand this. Let's see what the value is. Let's see the limitations of it. Let's see the benefit of it. I hope we are having a discussion around the changes it will bring, because the reality is human beings are not very good at implementing big technical change without consequences. And I'm hoping this time, I mean, I've talked about the fourth industrial revolution, you know, that whole concept. You know, those three previous ones were not particularly good for a lot of people in society. So what I hope we are talking about is actually we can get all the benefits without actually causing mass disruption and mass economic damage. Because actually, I'm a strong believer that regulation sometimes is a framework to move forward and not a limiter. It helps guide your focus. So I think in a year's time we will be much more in-depth. It's ethereal at the moment. In a year's time we'll be saying, well, this is the reality of it. This is what it means. This is what we need to do. I think a lot of the noise around regulation will have gone, because I'm a great believer in you just sticking to what you've got, as I said earlier. Yeah, don't reinvent the wheel. You've got loads of things like confidentiality, governance, corporate responsibility. You know, as I said, you know, if I did something wrong through AI and somebody sued me, you know, it wouldn't be under AI ML, it'd be corporate governance and, you know, duty of care. That's what, you know, so the rules about duty of care is, did you do something, was it reasonable, and did you take all practical reasons to do it? So you might be into what's a practical reason in AI and stuff like that, but I think it'll be a much more granular, mature debate. I think it'll become much more embedded in day-to-day life. You know, it'll be one of those things, it's like all technology, it sits over there, doesn't it? It's this ethereal thing, and suddenly it moves into mainstream. You know, I always joke, I'm old enough to remember, but before the internet and mobile phones, and you look at, you know, anybody under 40 now, they look at you kind of going, what? What? Not in a sort of, like, you know, hasn't the internet been there since, you know, the Big Bang? And, you know, but it'll get more embedded, people will understand it, it'll become more transparent, you know, and the world won't end. You know. There'll be a few bangs, but actually those are good. That makes people go, oh, hang on. It's like your first car accident, isn't it? You know, we always remember our first, whether it was a little one or quite a big one. It sort of drives you backward. I think we'll have a few of those. Hopefully it won't be too devastating. I think it'll be much more around the conversation around business value and what's delivering. We'll move from the technology focus into that. And that'll be good for the industry as well, actually trying, aligning itself more with actually are we delivering value for it? And if you look at a lot of the AI ML, we want to do the sexy stuff. A lot of it is your bog standard, can we do something more efficiently? You know, can we, you know, reduce headcount? Can we take the people we've got, remove them from the mundane to actually do it? I mean, in the NHS, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to give my analysts more capacity. You know, we do about 250 ad hoc analytical requests a month, which take about 2 hours. You know, if I can get that down using AI down to 20 minutes, because the crunchy bit in the middle is being generated automatically, I've got a massive efficiency gain. Process automation, you know, chatbots, all that stuff. Yeah, we want to do the sexy stuff, but I think a lot of it will be much more focused on the mundane, boring stuff, which is where the revolution will come. That's the thing that will drive it and embed it in lots of industries that don't use it now.
Well, I look forward to that conversation. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay.